Have you ever prayed and heard nothing? No sign, no answer, no measurable change, only silence, the kind that stretches for weeks, months, sometimes years, until the rational mind starts calculating probabilities and the emotional mind starts asking whether absence means neglect. This experience is not rare, and data from the Pew Research Center shows that over 55% of practicing Christians report extended periods where prayer feels unanswered, often coinciding with career instability, illness, or prolonged uncertainty, which is precisely when cognitive stress peaks and faith is tested most aggressively. Historically, waiting is not a side note in Scripture, but a structural pattern, because the biblical narrative consistently links delay with preparation rather than neglect, starting with Abraham, who received the promise of descendants around age 75 and did not see Isaac born until he was approximately 100, a 25-year delay that altered family structure, inheritance expectations, and social standing in ancient Near Eastern culture where lineage defined survival. Joseph's trajectory is even more specific. Sold into slavery around age 17, imprisoned for roughly 13 years before rising to power at 30, during which time Egypt experienced administrative reorganization that positioned him to manage a famine recorded in Genesis as lasting 7 years, meaning his waiting directly aligned with geopolitical timing rather than personal comfort. David was anointed king by Samuel around 15 years old, but did not ascend the throne until approximately age 30, spending over a decade in political exile while Saul's reign deteriorated, allowing power transfer without civil collapse. Even Jesus of Nazareth lived in obscurity until about age 30, a timeline consistent with Jewish law requiring priests to begin public ministry at that age, meaning his delay aligned with legal, cultural, and social authority structures rather than divine hesitation. The pattern is not emotional, but mechanical. Waiting synchronizes individuals with conditions they cannot control, such as laws, leadership failures, population readiness, or moral credibility. Modern psychology supports this mechanism, showing that delayed outcomes increase neural resilience and decision accuracy under pressure, which explains why Scripture repeatedly associates waiting with wisdom rather than punishment. Humor aside, the idea of instant results clashes with every documented biblical timeline because rapid elevation without structural readiness historically leads to collapse, as seen in leaders who gain authority before systems or character are formed. The discomfort of waiting often feels punitive because it removes feedback loops, no confirmation, no progress markers, but silence in biblical terms often signals alignment in progress rather than abandonment, setting the stage for outcomes that would fail if delivered earlier. This raises the central question, not of God's kindness, but of causality. Why would a loving God permit a process that feels like deprivation when evidence across Scripture suggests delay functions as calibration rather than denial, a concept that reframes unanswered prayer not as absence, but as sequencing, an idea that becomes far more unsettling once you understand the first reason behind it.
Waiting functions as a diagnostic tool rather than a pause button because delay removes external reinforcement and exposes what actually governs decision-making. Behavioral studies show that when rewards are postponed, people default to their strongest dependency, and Scripture mirrors this mechanism precisely in Israel's wilderness period, which lasted 40 years despite a journey that could be completed in 11 days from Egypt to Canaan, a discrepancy explained in Deuteronomy 8, verse 2, as intentional testing to reveal what was in the heart, not to change God's will, but to expose misplaced trust built under slavery systems. Egypt had provided food through forced labor, predictable rations, and centralized authority. So when Israel faced scarcity, their instinct was not prayer, but regression, documented in Exodus 16, where complaints peaked exactly 1 month after leaving Egypt, indicating that dependence, not faith, was their default survival strategy. Unanswered prayer operates the same way by removing outcomes as emotional currency, forcing the individual to confront whether obedience is conditional or absolute. Modern psychology identifies this as outcome-based attachment, where belief persists only when reinforcement is immediate, a model incompatible with biblical faith, which operates on covenant rather than reward. The removal of backup plans is not accidental but functional, because redundancy weakens commitment, as shown in military training where recruits are stripped of civilian support structures to enforce unit reliance, a process mirrored in Judges 7 when Gideon's army was reduced from 32,000 to 300 to eliminate false confidence rooted in numbers rather than obedience. The question, "Is God still enough?" is not rhetorical but operational, because divided reliance produces delayed action, inconsistent obedience, and premature decision-making, outcomes repeatedly associated with failure in Scripture. Abraham's impatience led to Ishmael around 2066 BC, creating generational conflict still referenced millennia later, demonstrating that premature fulfillment carries long-term consequences beyond the individual. Joseph's delay was not due to Pharaoh's readiness, as Egypt already possessed administrative infrastructure, but due to Joseph's character formation under asymmetrical power, false accusation, and forgotten promises, conditions necessary to prepare him for absolute authority without corruption. Genesis records Joseph was imprisoned around age 17 and released at 30, a 13-year period during which Egypt's leadership remained stable, confirming the delay targeted Joseph's internal readiness rather than external timing. Authority in Scripture consistently follows tested restraint because leadership without delayed obedience produces tyranny, as seen in Saul's reign collapsing after unauthorized sacrifice in 1 Samuel 13, when impatience replaced submission. Waiting, therefore, serves as a filtration process that removes ego-driven expectations and conditions the individual to operate without validation, a prerequisite for sustained authority. This is why waiting does not merely reveal trust, but constructs credibility, because systems, people, and power respond to those proven reliable in absence, pressure, and obscurity. And this structural escalation from trust exposure to authority formation is where waiting shifts from discomfort into something far more severe.
Miracles function as public demonstrations, but they do not generate durability because instant resolution bypasses the conditions that produce long-term stability, whereas waiting operates as a training environment where internal systems are rebuilt under constraint. Neurological research shows that repeated exposure to delayed outcomes strengthens the prefrontal cortex's regulation over impulse response, which explains why obedience formed during resistance outlasts motivation formed during reward. Scripture illustrates this through David, whose path to kingship bypassed institutional grooming and instead passed through geographic isolation, specifically the Cave of Adullam around 1025 BC, a limestone stronghold where he gathered a group of approximately 400 men, described in 1 Samuel 22 as distressed, indebted, and discontented, a demographic incapable of reinforcing ego or prestige. This environment eliminated external validation, replacing applause with survival decisions, which forced David to govern temperament, resource allocation, and moral restraint long before holding formal power. Waiting cultivates endurance through repetition without reinforcement, discernment through decision-making under incomplete information, humility through sustained anonymity, and faith through action without immediate confirmation, mechanisms that cannot be replicated through sudden success.
Historical analysis of leadership failures consistently shows collapse occurs when authority precedes tested restraint, as seen in Rehoboam's reign fracturing Israel in 931 BC due to inexperience under pressure. Caves, prisons, deserts, and exiles function as control environments where obedience is measured without incentive, because praise distorts motive by rewarding performance rather than submission. The absence of visibility removes performative faith, exposing whether behavior persists without witnesses, a condition mirrored in modern behavioral psychology, where intrinsic motivation proves more resilient than extrinsic reinforcement. Waiting also introduces conflict dynamics because prolonged uncertainty amplifies cognitive fatigue, which lowers resistance to compromise, a vulnerability exploited repeatedly in Scripture. Jesus identified this mechanism in the parable of the persistent widow, emphasizing endurance rather than speed as the determinant of justice. Spiritual opposition rarely focuses on immediate destruction because eliminating potential outright attracts resistance, whereas attrition through delay produces voluntary withdrawal, a strategy observable in military history where prolonged sieges result in surrender without direct assault. Biblical narratives frame this as warfare not through spectacle but through exhaustion, as seen in Elijah's collapse in 1 Kings 19, immediately after victory, demonstrating that depletion follows prolonged exertion rather than defeat. Satan's strategic advantage lies in patience erosion, not power confrontation, because abandoned callings require no opposition. Waiting, therefore, becomes the critical battlefield where continuation itself is resistance and quitting is framed as relief rather than failure. The danger is not delay, but interpretation, because meaning assigned to silence determines outcome, and this leads directly to the most destructive misconception associated with waiting, a belief responsible for more abandoned faith journeys than persecution or doubt combined.